This is Amanda Welch welcoming you to this Bite-Size Bio web seminar. Today's presentation is titled Research Communication. Get it right, do it often. And is being presented by Kate Christian, who is the Research Program Manager at Cure Cancer Australia. Kate Christian has worked in health and medical research for over 30 years, mostly for organizations conducting and supporting cancer research. Scientifically trained, she has chosen not to work in a laboratory, but to use her scientific background into a flair for organization to manage research projects and assist scientists with management of their research. Her objectives have included providing environments and skills which encourage effective, efficient research and to encourage and facilitate communication about that successful research to all stakeholders. The nature of her work has involved Kate with many early career researchers in a range of disciplines, and she has developed skills in teaching them how to manage themselves, their research, and their careers. Her recently published book, Keys to Running Successful Research Projects, All the Things They Never Teach You, is a compilation of the steps she believes it takes to make a successful and productive researcher. All you need to do is add good science. Now, having built up this body of expertise over many years, Kate is developing this learning further by undertaking a PhD. Here, she is focusing on the challenges faced by early career researchers in the sciences in Australia, which are not dissimilar for those scientists across the world. And she's always looking for ways to address some of those challenges. And this book provides just one such tool. Now, if you have any questions at the end of the webinar, please submit them to amanda@bitesizebio.com and we'll get them to Kate for an answer. The recording of the webinar will be available at bit.ly/SciCommWebinar. That's bit.ly/SciCommWebinar. So now over to you, Kate, for the presentation.
Hello, I'm Kate Christian, and I'm going to talk to you about research communication for scientists and suggest some ways you might be able to use it to enhance your reputation. There are many communication opportunities which should be part of your day-to-day research management, but unfortunately, many of these opportunities are neglected or not recognized by scientists. I'm going to show you ways you can raise your personal profile with peers and the public and raise the profile of your projects. I will also discuss the benefits of being able to speak in lay language, the benefits of clear written communication for your reviewers and funders, and the advantages of using social media and interacting with the public. First though, a little about me to explain where my ideas have come from. I've worked in the administration of health and medical research for over 30 years, mostly for organizations conducting and supporting cancer research. I'm scientifically trained, but I chose not to work in a lab. Instead, I've used my scientific background and a flair for organization to manage research projects and assist scientists with the management of their research. A big part of my job has been to teach early career scientists how to manage themselves and to teach them management skills. I'm currently a research program manager at Cure Cancer Australia. We fund early career scientists working in cancer research. Out of the teachings and learnings from my work, I've written and recently published this book, Keys to Running Successful Research Projects, All the Things They Never Teach You, is a compilation of all the steps I believe it takes to make a successful and productive researcher. I wrote it for early career scientists and for people who look after them, and a very large portion of it is dedicated to the importance of effective communication. So what's this talk all about? Well, the typical scientist, and particularly the typical early career scientist, is so busy focusing on their research and their outputs and grant applications and publishing, and more grant applications and more publishing, that they don't give priority to communicating about their research or even their successes outside of that framework. But it's these successes and outputs that build a reputation, and scientists should learn how to self-promote. In my experience, getting funded and published are not quite enough to ensure future success. You need to develop messages for people outside the immediate confines of your team, which provide better pictures than the muddle on this slide. Your institutional librarians and media specialists who collect evidence of research impact can readily demonstrate the benefits of good communication. So I'm going to give you some suggestions about how to effectively spend a little extra time enhancing your reputation by sharing information about you and your research, about what you're doing or why, and how it's progressing, so you can enhance your impact. So let's start right at the beginning with you. You might as well You might want to just get on peacefully with your science, but life isn't like that. You have to think outside your private world and consider how you're going to talk about your work to other people. Having a clear picture in your head about what you're doing and why, your big picture, is a great help. So take a moment or two, or a week or two, to think not about your immediate goals, but about your long-term vision and the impact you'd like to have. Why does your work matter, and to whom? What are you doing it for? Where will you make a difference? Then write the answers down. It's a great way to sharpen your perspective. Next, think about your audience. You'll find you have a few. These are your funders, your reviewers, your consumers or end users, your collaborators, your colleagues, and the public. These people can all be interested in your work, but each category will see it in a different light from the others. So now you've worked out why you're doing what you're doing, you can start on improving your profile. And you need to start with the basics. I suggest you start by completing your personal page on your institutional website. This is so easy to do, yet so many people don't complete their website information, or else they do it once, half-heartedly, and never update it. Yet these same people collect information about others from their personal profiles. It just doesn't make sense to neglect your own. It doesn't have to have huge detail, but it needs to have enough. I got into terrible trouble the other day for correcting the title for an associate professor back to doctor in a document we were preparing at work. I wasn't sure if she'd yet reached that next level, so I checked her webpage to be certain. I know now that she'd been promoted 6 months earlier, but she hadn't updated her profile and it still said doctor. Yet it was me that got into trouble. Put in your diary to check your personal page every 3 months to make sure something hasn't changed. Then I suggest that if your work is appropriate for it, you develop and similarly update a project website, or at least a web page linked to your personal page. If you work on more than one project, you can have a page for each, or you can include them on one page. Again, it doesn't have to have a lot of detail, but it provides another shop window for you and your research. At a minimum, this page can include the names of the investigators, a brief synopsis of the purpose of the project, and, if relevant, the names and logos of any funders. It can also have links to any publications or outputs. The end result is that the web page gives a picture of how collaborative you are and shows the sorts of people and organizations you collaborate with. The next one is social media. We could do a whole talk on this. Social media is a great way to let people know what you're up to. It costs nothing other than a little time and has the potential of for great reach. You should all be using it. Social media serves two purposes. It provides a way to keep the community informed about your research and is also a means to build your professional profile. It can give you and the institution incredible reach with minimal effort. Twitter and LinkedIn are the big social media applications, of course, and which you can use to enhance your reputation. Of course, you can still use Facebook or any of the academic social platforms like ResearchGate, or even less conventional places. I've seen scientists upload their presentations on SlideShare and put photos of crystals and cells on Instagram. With respect to LinkedIn, please understand that LinkedIn is not just for finding a job, it's for spreading the word. You can use it to display images or talk about achievements, upload reports. You can also use it to promote upcoming events related to your work, such as a conference or a meeting. The principle is always the same. If you use it well, you'll gain ease of access to all sorts of people and increase your audience. May seem obvious, but as for the personal profile on the website, you mustn't forget to update your social media profiles. Check once a quarter or so to make sure they're still relevant. Social media profiles are yet another shop window, the face of your brand, and they need to be complete and up to date. So now you've done the basics for your online presence. We'll start with communication at the beginning of the research process with your grant applications. You must treat your application as a document marketing you and your science. You need to sell both your science and yourself. and you need to make yourself stand out from the crowd. So these are the lessons. Within your application, you need to, of course, explain why your science is the best way. Convince your reviewer that you've consistently overachieved throughout your career and you can deliver. If you've changed fields, explain how each field has contributed to your development and recognize that's a plus. Also, it's good to describe where you want to be in a few years and how this project will help. It's all about building a picture of you and your science together. I often tell people to remember the reviewers. That's because scientists need to understand that it's people who may not be specialists or even scientists who will be reading their grant applications or reviewing their journal articles. There isn't always a benefit in cramming in copy to the absolute word limit. Your document needs to be clear and readable and not done in a rush. I recently sat on a panel which was reviewing tender applications for a technical service provider for medical research institutes. The variation in the applications was extraordinary. What was very clear, though, was which groups took time for preparing their application and paid attention to detail. One lot, who certainly wrote it on the day before the deadline, didn't even manage to put in the budget. Their day's work was completely wasted, as of course we didn't even consider it. Your potential funders might be specialists. They might be a government entity. They might be a community-funded organisation managed by members of the public. Whoever they are, you can be sure that at least some of the people within the organisation are human. Whether communicating electronically or face-to-face, think of them as people, not bags of money. While of course they'll still require good science, many funding bodies want emphasis placed on the impact the research will have. Their focus won't necessarily be about the funding you've previously awarded or your number of publications, but on the translation of your research into patient outcomes, better technology, or improved crop yields. While you're thinking through your application, it's helpful to find out what you can about the funders' requirements, why they're doing what they're doing. Do your best to reach out to meet their needs. Then we come to the abstract, your summary of the whole concept. The abstract's not something to be thrown together at the last minute before you submit the application. The importance of abstracts cannot be understated. Whether for a grant application or a paper, your abstract is the bait that catches the attention of your reader. Without proper attention to the abstract, the reader's eyes might glaze over and you won't get the concentration you deserve. Particularly for a journal article, you have to include enough information to encourage the reader to go on to peruse the whole paper. You need them to understand any subtleties or qualifications, as well as your detailed interpretations and suggestions for further work. It's a lot to fit into a small word count. Get it right, or all your efforts might well be in vain. Now for an even trickier one though, the lay abstract, which is sometimes a requirement. I've rarely seen a lay abstract, which is actually lay. It takes quite a skill to be able to prepare one, but it's vital that you get the lay abstract right. The people considering whether or not they'll fund the research will not always be scientists or subject matter experts themselves. That might be why they want a lay summary. So it's very important to make your lay summaries accessible to these audiences. In some cases, this section might be the only thing the reader will see to determine if your work is worthy of further attention. For those people who are required to have an involvement with consumers or end users and struggle with ways to do so, having a consumer read and comment on your abstract can be a really helpful task. If your consumers don't understand, then others are likely to have the same problem. If you don't have a consumer, ask a friend. It's very helpful. Then you need to learn how to speak lay. A really good start is to prepare your elevator speech. The 3-minute thesis is a great way for students to learn how to explain their research, but providing a brief, clear description about what you do and why is a skill everyone needs to have. It's not something just for students. It's not good enough to just say, I work at a university. People ask the question because they want to know the answer. Learning to speak to the public and or the people who supply your funds is a vital form of communication, particularly if your granting body is a community or non-government organisation. The listeners might need the research presented from an entirely different perspective from that of your peers, and talking to them usually involves learning to boil the research down to the absolute essentials. It's tricky to do, but very important. Along a similar vein, we come to reporting. The same principles apply when you report on your work. Again, think about your readers, because you want them to understand what you're talking about, and they want to understand you. That's why they've asked for a report. So you should report on your achievements, maybe on your failures, and especially on the outcomes and what comes next. Whoever they are, these people and organizations are involved with your funding because they care about the impact of your research. Again, there are humans at the other end of the send button. This slide, which I've made deliberately a bit blurry, is a real live example of an annual progress report to a family trust which funds cancer research. This is an example of what not to do. The man who's the main contact is an architect. He wouldn't have had a clue what this report was saying if I'd let it go out to him. I sent it back twice, and then I fixed it myself. This one, though, is an example of a perfect report to the same sort of funder. The man who wrote this is a clinician researcher. He's a pediatrician, so he's used to dealing with families of patients all the time, and that would certainly help. The point is, he tells them what they want to know. He says, "Thank you very much. We've made good progress, and now we're going to do X, Y, and Z." Put your feet in the shoes of the reader whenever you can. It can really help. Next bit I'm going to touch on is involving the public in your research. An effective way for researchers to introduce members of the public, and particularly their funding bodies, into their world is to create situations where people from both spheres can meet on equally comfortable ground. A lab tour can be a great, exciting tool for selling your research, especially if the visitors are non-scientists. Being in a lab or other technical environment might be standard for you, but it's totally new for others. It's a genuine value add for your supporters. You never know when you might meet a member of the public who has a vested interest in your work. They might have money or connections or both. Treat every interaction as a possible door opening. For this reason, it's a good idea to take the opportunities offered to address community meetings or put yourself into other situations where interested people might be. Never underestimate the power of the public to help you. Another good way of engaging the public is via project newsletters. I recommend that you create newsletters whenever there are project participants. This will, of course, need ethics IRB clearance. You can also send the newsletters to your funding bodies. These newsletters don't have to be fancy and can be developed with minimal or no costs, but they're a great way of feeding back. Newsletters can, of course, be sent on by the recipients, and this all helps promote your work and develop reputations. Encourage your readers to share the newsletters. Now, this might sound like an obvious piece of advice, but when you do a newsletter, take care to include your contact details and a date on all these very mobile publications. Now to the all-important publications. I have some suggestions about some ways you can broaden the impact of your publications. A good way to start is to think about your audience, preferably before you publish or even start writing. Back to the slides at the beginning of this presentation. Ask yourself, who is your target audience? The answer to this question should affect not only the journal you select, but the way you write the paper. Taking this thought a little further, who needs to receive your message? Who are you writing for? Having answered these questions, tailor your message accordingly. And then you get published. Fantastic. But getting published isn't enough. You need your papers read by as wide an audience as possible. Communication plans for each publication will help enormously with increasing your reach. So, once the paper is accepted, you should advise the media office and complete a communication plan with your media team. While the audience won't always be the public, there in fact is always a target audience. You'll find the media team will be very pleased to help you. Their job's finding and telling stories, and here you are delivering them one. Then you can do something about it yourself. As soon as your paper comes out, post about it on social media, and especially in LinkedIn and Twitter. Tell all your colleagues, sing your song. Now I'm going to talk just briefly about using communication to broaden your network and find like-minded people who could become your collaborators within your institution or elsewhere. A good start is to speak about your work internally. Don't restrict this to just your department, but seek out interdisciplinary meetings. You never know who'll be listening and how new links might form. Then, turning to outside, if you're lucky enough to attend an external meeting, do your best to meet as many people as possible. I know some people set themselves a target of introducing themselves to, say, 3 people a day. If this is a bit confronting for you, attending interactive sessions or workshops is a good, non-scary way to meet people at meetings. Then, when you get back, open more potential doors by reporting to your colleagues on your learnings at the meeting. You can report about your presentation, if you had one, and also about the work of others in the field that you came across. Try not to restrict this talk to your department. It's better if you can do it at an interdisciplinary meeting. Every single time you talk about your work and your interests, you're increasing your reach. Posters could be another whole session, but summing it up in one slide, let your posters speak for themselves and from a distance. Make them inviting to read, not a chore. Don't cover them with text. So the biggest tip, use big images and limit your text. Last, the t-shirt which brought me to Bite-Size Bio. As well as working out your H-index, these days you need to be able to describe the impact of your research and to routinely provide evidence of how your research in your papers has been translated. A number of citations is no value in itself. Try to work out who is doing the citing and why. What difference has your work made and to whom? This is your real outcome and encompasses very much more than output. You need to work out what your outcomes are. Write the answers down and again, review them regularly to give yourself and others a picture of your real achievements. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I like to think that the answers will be in my book. This is where you can buy it from Elsevier, the publishers. And if you write ATR30 at checkout, there's a 30% discount. Thank you very much.
That brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you again, Kate, for a very illuminating presentation. I loved it and I learned a lot by listening to you. And thanks to you, the audience, for taking the time to attend, to listen in. If you've enjoyed the webinar and would like to view the video recording of the session, please visit the webinars page on bitesizebio.com. It should be available within the next 24 hours. There, you can see the other webinars we have lined up for you on Bitesize Bio. So until next time, good luck in your research and goodbye from all of us on Bitesize Bio.